what are the things you think when Kyle Shanahan is stepping on the field, the practice field at OTAs with Trey Lance, that are the most important to him?
Well, several years ago, and it might have been the Super Bowl year, Jimmy had like a stretch of practices, and the difference was there weren't other quarterbacks that were breathing down his neck. Like he was the starter. He had been paid. He was coming off the ACL injury. Pretty sure he threw 5 pick sixes in a row. Not that same day, but like a pick six. The next day, another pick six, and it was like, this is not going well. And then he had a game against Denver or whatever, and it just felt like things are a little off kilter right now. And I think you can feel that. When I was with the Eagles, I guess it was
consecutive interceptions in one practice in 2019.
Oh, so it was even worse. In a practice, straight passes. That's pretty bad. When I first showed up to Philly, Donovan McNabb had just been traded, and Kevin Cobb, he wasn't the 3rd overall pick, but was the second round pick and the heir apparent, and was going to be the name the starter. Training camp did not go well. And then we had a couple preseason games, and it was even uglier. Then the first game, he got knocked out, and Michael Vick came in, and the rest was history. But things were brewing, I would say, before Mike went in. And what people weren't even looking at Mike like he was old Mike Vick. It was more just like, is this guy any good? To me, you could separate the guy breathing down someone's neck and just looking at a player independently. And you and I talked earlier today, like the way this thing is going to be covered for like 4 straight weeks, whenever the media is allowed in, and if you and me go to a practice or whatever, Jimmy's not going to be there. So there's no comparison going on. Like last year in training camp, it was all comparisons. Like Trey can do this, Jimmy can't do that. Trey threw 2 incompletions, and then David Lombardi would say Grant Cohn was wrong. He threw 4. It was just no one could get on the same page, but it was just comparing the two. To me, this is an independent, like, is he throwing picks? Like, Jimmy's not going to be able to throw a pick or not a pick. So it's like, is Trey Lance throwing interceptions? If they do one-on-ones, like, does Jimmy Ward pick him off? Does Tre'Davious Ward pick him off? Like, I'd say every pick he throws in practice, fair or not, is going to be a relatively big story. And it'd be hard to do what Jimmy accomplished on that given practice. If he were to have a day that's open to the media, let's just say, let's cut that number in half. 2 straight passes that are pick six, just 2. I'd say that'd be a pretty big. You might turn on ESPN and they'd be talking about it, right? I think his plays are going to be magnified, the bad ones, because I don't think you're going to get that much credit for the good ones.
Depends how they happen, right? Like last year, his good plays, some of them, we were there for his greatest practice play of the year, and it came, after a whistle would have been blown. For me,
where he rolled left and hit Trent Sherfield over the
shoulder. It was a great but part of why that was such an exciting play is just because of the physicality of the play and what a difficult play it is to make. Whether it's and he then replicated that in games, rolling left and throwing down the field like that. That was a thing that translated to games for him. Yeah, I think where he throws the football is important. Now, 50-50 balls down the field, the DB outfights right. We're not talking about those plays. I think specifically, is he getting tricked? Like those are the plays, right, where Fred Warner just appears out of nowhere. I think those are the plays that would concern Kyle Shanahan the most, because I think at his heart, Kyle Shanahan can do the basics in scheming plays open. So when he schemes you a play, are you able to put the ball in the right place? And when I say physically, are you able to discern properly where the right place to go with the ball is?
In lightning speed, right? Not this guy, the next guy.
Yeah. That's the part that I think, of all the things that happen in sports that we have no concept of, I would put how fast quarterbacks have to make decisions and what it actually looks like to them at the very top of the list of the most impossible to duplicate. I don't know what the equivalent would be to like driving a car through traffic with no lanes at what speed, but it's extraordinarily, we see it because most guys struggle with it and they're the best of the group that does what they do. But that to me would be the number one thing. Is it's one thing if he's throwing picks because whatever, like I think his footwork, the length of his throwing motion, whether his ball spirals or not. These are all things that'll play themselves out in real time. But just to get on the field, I think Kyle Shanahan has to trust that when he creates, and just like it worked against Jimmy Garoppolo in some spots, right? Where he missed throws too. Was it the Titans game where Kyle Juszczyk is wide open down the right sideline and Jimmy Garoppolo just misses him? Right. This is why I keep saying, and I went on Rob.
Remember when Mullins, they were playing the Eagles, and Juszczyk, like first play of the game, would have walked, 90 yards.
Well,
Mullins overthrew him by like 40 yards.
Garoppolo did it on the goal line with one of the running backs, remember? I think it was
it's happened to the 49ers several times over the last
I think it was Jeff Wilson Jr. was schemed wide open. I could be wrong about that, but I think it was Jeff Wilson Jr. schemed wide open on the goal line, and Jimmy completely missed him. It might have been the play where like Ayuk, I might be mixing plays up, where Ayuk was lined up at like tight end, something crazy.
It's happened to Juszczyk definitely several times over the last several years.
I was talking to Rob Stats Guerrera. I was on his podcast. I think he's going to put out later in the week yesterday. And from SB Nation. And I said, you were talking about Jimmy. And I said, one of the things I think we forget, I think when Jimmy's not playing, we overemphasize how much Kyle likes him. And then when we're in the season, it's clear that there's a lot of things that Kyle Shanahan wants to do that Garoppolo cannot do consistently, right? We're talking about a guy that threw 20 touchdowns and 12 interceptions last year. We're talking about a guy whose best year was 13 picks, but it also was 27, career high 27 interceptions.
No one transitions better from wanting to kill him on the sideline to pretending they're okay post-game press conference.
Yeah, like he Kyle. Does because he didn't have options. So, like, I don't think there is this standard of perfection that Trey Lance has to reach in order to be good enough for Kyle Shanahan.
Not replacing Brady or Mahomes here.
He's not. And that's not who's looking over his shoulder. And that's what I keep going back to. I think the reason ultimately we end up with Trey as the starting quarterback, even if Garoppolo's around, is Kyle Shanahan has played this game. And we could argue time and time again, but it's gotten him to the Super Bowl and it's gotten him to the NFC Championship game. Yes. But it almost hasn't gotten him there many other times as well along the way. And he hasn't ultimately won the championship. And the teams that have won in that stretch that he had a shot was Patrick Mahomes' team and Matthew Stafford's team. And, whether or not it's easy to say to buy the exercise bike, you still got to get on it. It's easy to say like, all right, I'm going to get the quarterback who can do things that I can't control. You still have to ultimately take him off the leash and let him do his thing. Right. But we are not talking about a guy that is replacing perfection. Jimmy Garoppolo is no Alex Smith. He's closer to Carson Wentz than he is to Alex, right? Not in physical traits, but in play style.
Yeah.
So this idea that Trey does not have to be, Trey throws a couple picks, whatever. I think what's going to matter to Kyle is he seeing it? Why does he throw an interception? Because he takes a chance? Okay, I can live with that, right? Because I might get more interceptions, but if Trey Lance throws 12 picks this year, is he going to throw 20 touchdowns or is he going to throw 28 touchdowns?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you there. But what is going to happen is, in last year, it happened for a second, but Kyle really just slowed it down pretty fast in terms of his words, in terms of the hype train. Kyle was good at that. I give him, because again, he's a 68-year-old coaching mind and style in a 42-year-old skinny body. So it's just, he's this conundrum. Like, really, Sean McVay feels young. Like, Sean McVay feels like our age, and he wants to throw the ball out.
I prefer my young people to feel old, by the way.
No, me too. Kyle is more my style. Even though if I had to go to Scottsdale for the weekend, I'd probably go with Sean.
Yeah.
But the plays that go poorly are going to be magnified, and there's not Jimmy around to compare them to. So it'll be interesting if, again, it's just the off-season activities. But if it were to get weird, and I think you would agree, there is possibility if it looks pretty clunky out there for it to get weird. And here's the other thing I was thinking when you were talking. The other thing, Kyle can scheme guys open. I bet he's telling, he loves DeMeco Ryan. Throw the fucking kitchen sink at him. Throw it all. And D'Amico's good.
Do what teams would do to him, right? Do what
you do to people. Like, you guys get after his ass. And here's the thing. So half the teams in the league, defense sucks. Coordinator, the fans will want that guy fired by September 25th. The Niners have a defensive coordinator who is under 40, who more than likely is going to be a head coach next year. And it's pretty clear that the Niners
brings the heat in crunch time, by the way, too.
Yeah, but do you think Vic Fangio is there randomly, or is like he is the?
I think Vic Fangio's almost been the Niners defensive coordinator twice in the last. It just hasn't lined up with his availability and their needs. But
one thing
Vic has a connection to this organization still.
His girlfriend, I guess, does live in Northern California. Is one connection, like why he's just naturally out here.
I just know, talking to Niners people as you have, that Vic is on there. Vic is on the organizational shortlist, even without Shanahan's involvement. I think the organization values Vic Fangio as a defensive coordinator. Yeah.
So when you get, I'm not saying D'Amico's done enough to be Vic, but when you have a high level coordinator in your building in OTAs, I think it can really help improve the other side of the ball, or expose like, this guy is, just because you're dealing. This is not about physicality, right? They're not tackling. They're not. I think they've even hesitated around the league of how physical they are with the lines. Because I think sometimes we've all been to, even if you're just listening to this, you've seen enough like film over the years of like things going viral. It's kind of weird with no pads on, the pass rush and the O-line, like kind of a unfair situation for everybody. That's why, like you said, I think last week, like you can't even run plays. Like they don't have pads on. Like what? So, but the passing game, which I think is Trey. The least of my worries would be Trey in the running game, handing plays off in Kyle's offense, right? The passing game is where he's going to either have to be credible or uncredible, or fixable and improvable. And I think we're going to have a feel like, I'm interested on a most basic level. Like I'm not Bill Walsh. I can't the footwork unless he's like tripping. It happens so fast. And we don't have the all 22 like the team does after practice. To me, is the loopy release still exactly the same? Is he quicker than it felt like he was last year? Because to me, you just get quicker the more decisive you are. How do you get more decisive? You just understand it better.
Remember, that was a big part of the conversation last year you and I arrived at. Like, if he makes quicker decisions, you can live with that release.
Because, I mean, if you watch Josh Allen, he does have a loopier release. He just sees it and lets it rip. And what do offensive coaches have been saying forever? Let it rip. And what do they mean? When you see it, you got to go with it. This is not, and this goes back to the way like the Dilfers and the Youngs talk about those small windows. Like the difference between like a college quarterback and the NFL quarterback is how much smaller the window is. And I think like Brady would be like, well, the windows used to be way smaller like 10 years ago. They're actually bigger now. But relative to college and what he's used to North Dakota State, they're still relatively small. And to me, it's over the next month, like guys are flying around. You know, the linebackers for the 49ers are buzzing around the intermediate short area of the field where it's just a safe place for the quarterback. Because if I remember correctly, some of Jimmy's 5 pick sixes, a couple were to Fred. And I kind of like having really sweet linebackers because when all else fails, like Trey's just going to look to dump it to a tight end or a running back, and those fucking guys are flying around. Yeah. And whose baby is that? Well, that's the defensive coordinator's baby because he's a star middle linebacker. Right. So that's
green dot.
I kind of like that test. But I'm telling you, guy, I think the bad stuff is going to feel big on the internet, the way we talk about it, more than like we've seen him make good plays. And I think the hype is going to feel unfounded because it doesn't mean anything. Where the bad is like, this is Jimmy Garoppolo all over again.
But that is where I think the context matters. What happened on the play, right? Is he taking a chance? And Kyle's like, hey man, just go with your first read next time. Stop fucking around trying to hit the home run. That's a different coaching point than did you not see what was going on there?
Yeah, or balls flying way over guys' heads. It's like, is this guy accurate enough?
But again, we've lived through that.
But I'd say if Trey's an inaccurate quarterback, we got a major problem because Kyle's inaccuracy is not something he lived.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Jimmy was
on a day-to-day basis.
Was a 68% passer last year, even though we rightfully, I think, saw a lot of inaccuracy from Garoppolo. He was at the end of the day a upper echelon pass completer relative to the crew.
Right now, short and intermediate, where ultimately the Niners are going to live besides some deep bombs that ultimately Trey he's not going to be. I mean, if you're 50-50 on those, you're in good shape. are we sure that this year Trey Lance would be as accurate as Jimmy on the short and intermediate stuff?
Well, no. I mean, speaking of throws to Kyle Juszczyk,
Well, I mean, he's
the
skipping
first
balls
throw he
away.
made, and now the first of his life career, basically. But Cody on the stream says most QB coaches I've listened to don't seem to be concerned with changing the player's arm motion. They are much more focused on what's going on with their feet. I would say I agree with that, Cody. I think most QB coaches I've heard talk, and certainly Kyle Shanahan, they care way more about the footwork than the arm motion.
Feels like the feet meshed up with the eyes and the timing of the play, right?
Yeah.
Because if your feet are behind because you have to be on the same wavelength. If Brandon Ayuk has a route where the ball has to be there when he hits a certain point, and you're supposed to get rid of it at a certain point in your drop, and everything's off. This is the highest level of the game, right? It's why, honestly, football has an element that just the other sports don't, because there's this element to every play, and especially intricate offenses, that one thing Jimmy did have is an understanding of all that shit, whether it didn't always work because he maybe wasn't talented enough or his physical limitations, but it did feel like he had honed in on that. And it'd be unfair to think that Trey would have that year one as a starter.
Right.
You can't.
No.
But I'll never forget the combine a couple years ago, Sean McDermott, about Josh Allen, who had just had the best year of his career. It was year 2. But everyone was like, he's just still really inaccurate down the field. And Sean was like, well, we're going to add, they hadn't added quote unquote digs yet, but he was basically saying, we're going to add something for him. And we just think his natural progression as a guy who works hard at this, who we're going to coach the shit out of, is just going to continue to improve. We're confident in our abilities to coach him, his abilities to work with it, and it to just keep the trajectory to keep moving up. You don't always go from like the second step of the ladder to the 8th. And that, again, goes back to what I'm saying, can just be a very, very intense when you're living in the moment. Like, why is he can't do this? And it can feel really big on negative stuff. I think the negative stuff, I'm not even talking with Kyle. I'm talking the outside. Then the players are going to talk about it, and Kyle might try to quiet it all, but it just has a chance to get out of kilter if there's just some random bad plays, because it would happen to Jimmy.
It would,
and he would always.
There was no one there to take his job. There was no one there to take Garoppolo's job.
And Kyle would always just be like, "Yeah, we'll just fucking keep going. We're fine."
Austin says, I also think we need to discuss how weird Kyle's play calling was with Trey. It was not normal offensive play and led to a lot of 3-and-outs. I think that's the other reason he's got to be committed to Trey, and I think he will be, is because it is different for Kyle, right? This is an adjustment for Shanahan. Do you know how many rushing touchdowns Josh Allen has in his career? 4 years in the NFL.
I remember we talked about this last year a lot.
Yeah. He's thrown 103 passing touchdowns for Josh Allen. Josh Allen rushing touchdowns, 31. So basically almost a quarter, 103 plus 31 divided by 134. It's probably like, it's almost a quarter of his total touchdowns accounted for are touchdowns he ran in.
I think they want to get away from that now that he's really expensive, because they drafted a Georgia running back in the 2nd round. They don't want him to always be the running back.
No,
because if you watch them play
the last 3 years, it's 109 attempts, 102 attempts, 122 attempts.
But if you watch them, they do run some quarterback power. It does also feel like some of it's him just taking off because he's a pretty elite. He's faster than Trey. I know there are times I don't even think Trey actually ran, but I watched the two of them go. I'm taking Josh in a race with the pads on.
Yeah. Well, but my point in that, going back to Austin's question, is I don't think we've seen comfortable Trey Lance running an offense in terms of actually running the football. And I think that's got to be part of Kyle's rhythm for him, is what kind of run attempts is he getting out of Trey Lance? Because I don't think we didn't see comfortable run.
Do you remember last year, definitely training camp, but maybe in the OTAs too, it felt all they were doing was like the 2009 Kaepernick offense. It was just running him up the middle. It's like, what is this? I would get away from that during this period, and we would be throwing.
Yeah,
we would just be throwing to just try to see where we're at. What am I getting out of him running against tapping them on the hip?
Well, nothing, because I watched him during the season. It didn't serve any purpose other than, I guess, training the actual blocking portion of it, right?
But I'm with you. It's going to be that's an element that's going to be very, very fascinating is the quote unquote scheme. And just like, or they just, you just shotgun 3-4 wide and letting him rip it. Or it's like, he's still kind of in the zone read looks and him kind of give or take and then run quick RPO type stuff.
And does Kyle have any sense of rhythm? Does Kyle have any rhythm with it?
I'm telling you, I think it's going to be really intense for Trey. Just because everyone is just Kyle, us. Here's the sneaky part, and they're going to do a good job because they got the team. Like if you're Fred, like Fred, George, all these. I'm trying to fucking win a Super Bowl right now.
Well, Fred, remember Fred said he looked great in practice last year. Was that to earn a bonus or?
Yeah, I mean, pretty easy to say when you're. Remember he was going to be the starting quarterback against the Texans.
That's right.